welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Welcome to another episode of Up Close with Carlos Sang. My next guest is currently touring in a brand new production of A Voyage Around My Father. He has previously been seen in productions of Othello and Translations, and was also in Belgravia as Charles Pope. It's a huge delight to be able to introduce the wonderful Jack Bardoe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been, a good 50 years since, A Voyage Around My Father first, premiered on stage. And why did now feel like such a good time to be telling the story again?
Well, I wasn't part of the conversation as to do the play and to put on the play. I joined at a later point, but I think the thought behind it was that it's a window into a sort of lost England, a window into the past. I said when I got the job and I was discussing with my friends what I was doing. A lot of people my age don't know who John Mortimer is or was, but he was a hugely important figure in British cultural life. For a large part of the 20th century. So I think the thinking was it was a window into the past, a window into a slightly forgotten England.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable, how John Mortimer's writing, really still speaks to audiences today, but, really captures that period, of that lost England, as you say. What was your first reaction to reading the script when you received it?
I think I was quite confused by it because he's actually quite an awkward writer in many ways. And a lot of the language it's all about subtext and it's very coded. And I don't think I quite got that when I first read it. So I think I was probably quite perplexed by it. A lot of the conversation seemed very strange. And then going into rehearsals, it illuminated it for me in a really helpful way. And because really, I think the whole play is always orbits around sex, and sex is everywhere in the play. And when I first read that, I probably didn't see that. So a lot of the sections of the play where sex is just below the surface, I couldn't see it at all when I first read it. So I think I was probably quite perplexed, but then reading it in rehearsal and being guided through it by Richard Eyre and Rupert Everett, I started to find it very, very funny. And very cheeky, actually.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of laughs in the audience when I went to see it. It definitely still has that humor. I found it also quite interesting, how a lot of the characters, including yours, they're not actually named in the show. It's just the father, the son. Why do you think this was as well?
Well, I don't. Even though it's ostensibly about John Mortimer's life, I don't think it's meant to be a completely autobiographical piece. I certainly don't see my task in acting in the play is to be John Mortimer, and I think he's probably written it like that intentionally to add a sort of layer of distance between him, his family, and the events in the play. So it's very much the way I see it is it's presented as a story inspired by the events of his life, but it's not. He hasn't written this is what John said, and with the other characters he's renamed them to be different from the ones that they're based on in real life. So I think it's probably to put a little bit of distance between the real life events and the events as depicted in the play. It is still to a certain extent a fiction.
Yeah. Definitely. John Mortimer, he had a pretty extraordinary life, as both, a writer and a lawyer, as well as a father too. Was there anything about John that you particularly found, really interesting too when you were researching him?
Just how much he got done, I think. He seems to be one of these people with a sort of insatiable appetite for life and for output, really, and to balance his massive literary output with his legal career. God, it makes me feel quite lazy, thinking about everything he managed to do. And, he was just nonstop, and did it all with a kind of level of ironic humor and fun. And so I guess just his work rate and his appetite for life and everything he managed to do and get through and the legacy he's left. That's probably what I found the most interesting.
Yeah. You're playing Rupert Everett's son in the show. What has it been like, working together on, creating that father-son dynamic too?
Really fun. Rupert is, I mean, he's got a great character here, but he's hilariously good fun to work with. And just a real privilege, he's a fantastic person. And yeah, rehearsing was a real joy. We were just having such a laugh the whole time we were doing it. And yeah, it's just been, just a real privilege. He's a really fun actor to work with.
Yeah, was there much in the son as well that you were able to identify within yourself too?
Um, Probably the sort of, the awkwardness and that sort of classic English awkwardness. I think I've probably got a lot of that in myself, probably more than I'd like to admit. Yeah, that kind of awkward humour that's very typical of English young men. I think I've definitely got a lot of that in myself.
Yeah, I mean, watching the show, so you can also, sort of tell that it's being directed by, Richard Eyre, Sir Richard Eyre.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so stylish and so well put together. What have the conversations been like with Richard Eyre on, bringing this show to a modern audience?
I don't know if we had many conversations about bringing it to a modern audience. I think, well, yeah, I don't know if we had many. I think our objective was very much to place it in its time, you know, and to give us as honest a depiction of that time period as we could. So we talked a lot about the time period, which Richard comes from. So there was a lot of references in the play that people who are younger don't really know anymore, don't really understand. So I think, I guess that's what we did. Is we would just talk for hours about the minutiae of the world that we were depicting, and through all the references in the play, and really painting that picture as vividly as we could, so that it could be communicated to a modern audience.
Yeah, I mean, this is, you've done a number of, period pieces, translations,
Mm,
Belgravia, Voyage Around My Father now. Did you
mm.
always have an interest in, historical pieces and, see yourself as a period actor too?
No, not necessarily. It's just something that it happens to be the jobs that I've done so far. But I love modern drama. I think you can have rubbish stuff that's set in period time and rubbish stuff that's modern, and great stuff that's period and great stuff that's modern. I'm interested in great drama, whether no matter when it's set. And a lot of great writing is period writing, because that's the writing that's lasted. Rubbish writing tends to sort of disappear, so the great writing persists, and that's why we have such a rich canon of period work to revive. But no, it's not something that I ever intentionally saw myself specifically aiming for. It just happens to be the work that I've done since I left drama school.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time you've really toured as well as an actor. How's that
Yeah,
experience too been, see performing for audiences around the country?
it's really fun. It's quite. I mean, it's quite. It's a challenge. It's a big part I'm playing in this. I'm on the stage essentially the whole show, so I don't really have a lot of energy for much else when I am, on the road, and I often just go back and forth between the theatre and where I'm staying. So I've just got back from Cardiff, and I hardly really saw Cardiff. I'm afraid to say. I wish I had got a chance to kind of walk around and have a little look at the city, but I basically just got to know the walk from the Airbnb to the theatre. So I think it is fun, but especially with this role for me, it's a challenge, and I feel I'm quite consumed with the task of the play, rather than kind of visiting these different places. But it's wonderful to take it to new theatres. Going into a new theatre is the most exciting part of the week for me. Entering that space for the first time and you sort of retech the show quickly. And each theatre brings a slightly different feeling to the play. Like in some theatres it feels cozier, in some theatres it feels a bit more grand, and it's a tremendous privilege as an actor to be trying out all these spaces. It's like doing 10 jobs in one, experiencing however many theatres we do in one job. It's a tremendous privilege.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you started the show in Bath as well, and that's one of my
Mm.
favorite regional theatres. They do so much
Mm.
great work over there. Had you visited Bath before, and how would you describe performing in that venue too?
I visited Bath. I'd never been to the theatre. It's a beautiful theatre. It's gorgeous. Yeah, I mean, yeah, beautiful theatre. It's very different from the theatres I'd performed in before. Yeah, it's an interesting space. It feels very sort of long and thin, and because it's got these deep, the circles go way back, so it's a big space to fill with your voice. But it's gorgeous to be in, and to look out of from the stage. It's a wonderful view, and yeah, and Bath is beautiful as well. Walking around Bath, we were there for a bit longer because it was our first stop, so we were there for 2 weeks, and we teched the show and did dress rehearsals of the show there. Our previews were there. So yeah, it's a gorgeous place to perform, and where the theatre is situated right in the middle of Bath, which is such a beautiful town. Yeah, it's a lovely place to start. Really lovely place to start.
Yeah. Have there been any, highlights of the tour so far in terms of places that you performed in?
Richmond's been great, just because the audiences. We got some really wonderful houses in Richmond. I think a lot of people's, because a lot of us are London based in the cast, so a lot of people's friends and family came. But also the houses just always seemed so full, and the reactions were really warm. I think people really loved the show there. So it was quite an exhausting week because you tended to have people in most nights, so we were always sort of staying on afterwards to spend some time with people and have a few drinks. So by the end of the week, I was pretty wiped. But that week was probably the highlight for me so far, just because of we had some really full houses and they were really loving the show, and there was a wonderful energy in the theatre.
Yeah, amazing. I one of my favorite shows of 2019 was coming to see Translations at the National Theatre. I thought your Lieutenant Yolland was so sweet, and his romance with Moira was really great.
Oh,
What was
thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I said I really did genuinely love it. What was it that drew you as an actor to that show and to that character?
Well, it's such a beautiful play. It's a gorgeous play, and it was an unbelievable privilege for me. It was my first theatre job, so it's not like I was choosing between things. It was very much a case of being sent the audition and by my agent, and doing it a few days later. I wasn't actually that familiar with the play, but I've read it a few times and I was absolutely bewitched by it. I mean, it's a beautiful play and such a wonderful part. And that love scene is one of the great love scenes, I think, in all in all theatrical writing between him and Moira. And then it was at the National as well, and with Ian Rickson, who's a genius director. And with some actors that I've been watching for years. So I was just, it was a dream come true, really, doing that job when it came along. Yeah, I mean, I've been going to the National Theatre all through my life, growing up. Before I even knew I wanted to be an actor, so then to be out on the Olivier stage, I mean, like, even thinking back to it makes me sort of start taking deep breaths. It was gorgeous, beautiful experience. When you do, it's just theatre's just when you're with a director that great and a team of actors that wonderful and working in text that amazing. It's really acting you just sort of let it happen. Really, acting can become. The more you get yourself out of the way, the better, and you just sort of let the writing flow through you. And it was a beautiful experience. I had the time of my life doing that play. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Ian Rickson is definitely one of my favorite directors as well. I've loved watching his work
Yeah.
over recent years too. And it's interesting because I feel like Translations, it feels like quite a domestic piece. It feels quite intimate. But then you've got it on the Olivier stage where it feels so epic as well. How did you handle
Yeah.
that sort of juxtaposition too?
Well, Olivier is an incredible space. It does when you're on there. I mean, there's a technical thing about being on the Olivier, which is obviously because it's sort of almost in the round. You just have to take a lot of your thoughts outwards, because obviously we rehearse in a box in a room, so you don't have that eye for the fact that wherever you are standing on the Olivier stage, there are pretty much always people behind you. So the technical aspect of that just means there's a lot of having a conversation with somebody there, and then a new thought sort of taking you over there and continuing the conversation with whoever's there, walking in the opposite direction and taking lots of thoughts up as well. So you're sharing physically and vocally with that huge auditorium. But it does have. It's not because I did Othello in the Lyttleton, and the Lyttleton, I believe it's smaller, but it feels like people are further away. In the Olivier, I remember feeling, even though it is such a big space, that you are closer to everybody. So it has that more intimate feeling. You feel like you're amongst, because obviously the stage protrudes into the audience. You are amongst the audience more, as opposed to the Lyttleton, where obviously being sort of proscenium arch, they seem a lot further away. You feel like you're on a stage and they're watching from the outside. So with the Olivier, it's an incredible space because it does have that epic but also intimate feeling to it, no matter what you're doing there, I think.
Yeah, and I think it lends itself very well to a piece like Translation, so you do get that intimacy as well, with
Yeah,
the content of the piece. Yeah, you mentioned Othello as well, which I also came to see last year. Another great highlight, it was great watching this piece, with Giles Terera taking on, the role of Othello, and um,
yeah.
yeah, how did you find that experience, working with Clint Dyer, and did you have any discussions about, what it meant for it being, the first major production directed by a black director?
Oh yeah, yeah. We did. We had a lot of discussions along those lines. From the off, we wanted to, Clint saw the play, rightly so, I think, as a play that deals with race fundamentally, which is not. It seems obvious now when you say that, but historically, a lot of actors and directors haven't seen that as the focus of the play, and so he was very clear with us as a sort of mission statement from the off as this to be a play that deals fundamentally with race and with racism and racial issues. It felt in the rehearsal room, it felt like we were doing something very significant. It was fun, and it was still a fun experience rehearsing the play, and it was a lovely group of people. But there was a sort of reverence to the importance of the task and the importance of the play, and rightly so. The issues that it deals with should be dealt with carefully. It's in many ways a very very dark play, and there was a big focus on our well-being as actors, and for Clint as the director, dealing with those issues day in day out. It felt like we were doing something important, and also something we had to really take care of ourselves over and take care of it so that we did it justice. But a tremendous privilege to be involved in.
It's really interesting to hear you say that about Othello. I think it was a really groundbreaking production, and you felt like you were watching something really special when I was watching it. As someone who has been going to the National, throughout your life, as you said, how much would you say the National has changed over that time, and where do you see the National being, when Rufus Norris steps down in 2 years' time?
Oh God, I don't really know. I mean, I feel like the National right now under Rufus and Clint, even the historical pieces that it does them in a very relevant way, in a very topical way. And I think that was what was exciting about Othello, is it felt like an Othello for our time. And the other stuff they do, it always it felt for me recently, as opposed to maybe years, times gone by, um, very relevant and very what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, it's very relevant and very important for now. The pieces they put on, they're always trying to speak to a modern audience and speak to a theatre that's current, and doesn't feel like museum theatre. So I don't know where it's going to go from here with Rufus stepping down, but I hope it keeps that spirit, because I know conversations with friends who are in the industry, and also friends that are not in the industry, that there's some really exciting stuff, especially for younger people, um, at the National at the moment. And people, the effect recently, it felt like everybody was talking about the effect in town, whether you're involved in theatre or not. And I think it's important for the National to be doing stuff like that, and to be interesting, to be actively interesting younger audiences and current audiences in exciting and vital theatre for now, for today, not just stuff that sort of museum pieces, from the past. So I hope that legacy continues.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely been some really great work this year, and especially with things like The Effect and Dear England and Motive and the Queue. I know
Yeah,
you're working now with Richard Eyre, who used to be artistic director of the National too. Have you spoken to
yeah.
him about the state of the National as well?
We didn't. No, I didn't. He talked a lot about, one of the joys of rehearsing was hearing all the stories about various, just him talking to Rupert about various people and about their careers and different stories from their careers. I don't know if we talked. I don't think we had a conversation about the National Theatre, now that I think about it. But I believe he's written a book, hasn't he? I think he wrote a book about his tenure at the
Ye-
National.
yes, I think it was called like
If
National
people are interested,
Service. Yeah.
National Service, yeah, yeah. I haven't read, but maybe I will now that I have worked with Richard. Oh, the one thing he talked about was starting rehearsals late, because he started his rehearsals at 11:45, And he says the reason, and so sort of we start at 11:45 and basically not really have a lunch break. And he said he did that. He started doing that at the National to avoid, paranoid actors coming over to him to ask him what he thought of every little part of the play and of their performance. So that's one thing he did mention. But I don't think I had a conversation with him about the National Theatre.
Yeah, I mean, you've been working with some fantastic directors, Richard Eyre, Clint
Mm.
Dyer, Ian Rickson, three fantastic directors. What do you
Mm.
think, as an actor, what sort of stuff do you look for in a director, and what do you think makes a great director?
I think great directors, they allow you to do your best work. They allow you to unlock your best work. It's not about, I think the best directors are really interested in you I remember feeling that way about working with Ian Rickson, is that he was sort of obsessed with his actors. And that's the reason he wanted to work with them, is because there was something about the energy they brought to audition, or the energy they bring to performance, that he was so interested in, and he just wanted to unlock that as much as possible. And so you feel like the best directors are sort of facilitators, and they create this space for you to really thrive as an actor, and for your creativity to be, and your sort of energy, performing energy, to be unlocked fully, rather than kind of walking you through exactly what they think you should be doing, and giving you a kind of step by step guide for how to for what to do. They create the space in which you discover it yourself, and then in doing so create a really creatively fulfilling environment in rehearsal. So I think the best directors are the best creative facilitators, rather than sort of more directly instructing you what to do. They're allowing you to discover it yourself, and allowing you to unlock your own creative energy. I think that's what and I've had that with all of the directors I've worked with.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, again, you've worked on some great writing, John Mortimer, Shakespeare,
Mm.
Brian Friel. What do you
Mm.
look for in a script, before, accepting, an offer?
Stuff that just excites me. Stuff that I read, and as an actor, there are certain things you read, and you think, yeah, I know. Your mind just starts firing, thinking about what you could do with that. So stuff that you read and you start to sweat because you're because you get really excited about what that could be, or what you could do with that, how you could bring that to life. Stuff that inspires you, and starts giving you ideas. Ideally, I want to be reading something, and then for the next, until I pick it up again, I'm imagining what I could be doing with that, how I could be playing with that, how I could, different ideas. But yeah, just inspiring ideas to come into your head about how you could perform it. That's what I look for.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, you've done some great work, as we've already said. I think it is just, slightly, I guess, unfortunate as well that, none of these writers that you've worked on are still around with us today. If someone
Yeah.
like, John Mortimer was around today, is there anything that you would have liked to have asked him about doing Voyage Around My Father?
Oh God, that's a tough question. Is there anything I'd like to have asked him? It's difficult now, because the process is, we're performing it. So I feel like I'd be interested for him to see it, and then have a chat with him about it generally, what he thought. And I suppose how different our takes are from the way he originally envisioned it, or how similar. I guess that would be what I'd talk to him about. But yeah, I mean, I'd just be interested to hear what he thought about it generally.
Yeah, I think that would be, yeah, that would be really interesting. Did you know much about, the show, before going into it? Had you seen, the television films that had been released previously?
No, I mean, I knew who John Mortimer was, but I didn't know the play. And then, having got the job, I researched it and read about him, and watched bits of the um, Olivier version, which is on YouTube. Which, not all of it, because I don't like to watch sort of whole other takes on what other actors are doing with a job that I'm about to start. But for little bits of it, just for the sense of certain lines and stuff, I would watch clips of that. But yeah, so I knew who he was, but I wasn't familiar with the play.
How did you become Jack Bardoe?
Well, Bardo is my middle name, so it's my mum's family name. So my name is Jack Morris. My full name is Jack Bardoe Morris. When I was leaving drama school, you create your spotlight and you join Equity, and there was already a Jack Morris actor, I believe. So I couldn't be Jack Morris, because you can't have two actors with the same name. The next thing that popped into my head was Jack Bardoe, just because that's my middle name.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Looking ahead, then, are there any, particular, creatives or actors that you'd still like to work with, or do you have any like dream roles that you'd like to do?
Oh god, I mean, I do love Shakespeare, so doing something like Macbeth or I don't know Henry V or something like that would be amazing. I love like all the stuff Rebecca Frecknell's doing at the moment. I think it's so cool. Also Robert Icke, all the stuff I've seen of his, I absolutely love. Yeah, there's a lot of different things, but we'll
Yeah.
see. Just take it one job at a time.
Yeah. Have you seen anything, interesting that's particularly stood out to you as well recently?
I loved the Crucible at the National. I saw that right before I went and started rehearsing. I thought that was fantastic. Really, really great. I had never read the play, and it's such a fantastic play. So I had a really great evening at the theatre watching that. But so much, I think there's a lot of really, really great theatre at the moment. I haven't really been able to watch a lot recently because I've been on tour. I've been touring, but yeah, bunch of things. I think there's just a lot of fantastic theatre on at the moment.
Yeah. Is there anything you're particularly looking forward to seeing, once you've finished with Voyage Around My Father?
I want to go see The Ocean at the End of the Lane, which I believe is on in town at the moment. Um,
Yes.
that's just been recommended to me, and it was actually on at the National when I was doing translations, but obviously I couldn't see it because I was doing translations. But I had a friend of mine went to see it the other day and said I really have to go see that. So that I'm very wrapped up in this show at the moment, so I'll have to take a beat once I've finished and have a little look at how the land lies and go start seeing some plays again.
It's been so wonderful talking to you. Just as a last question, what do you hope audiences will take away with them when they go and see Voyage Around My Father?
I hope it makes people think about the relationship they have with their parents and the kind of the tragedy and the comedy of familial relations, especially between parents and their children, not just between fathers and sons, but fathers and daughters and sons and mothers. And I hope people, even though this play is a window into a different world, into the past, into an England that isn't really very familiar to the England people know today. I hope people recognize a commonality in the exploration of the familial relations depicted in the play, and I hope it moves people, and I hope it makes people laugh.
Jack Bardoe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, my pleasure.